Piper slammed her test paper onto my desk. A perfect score, exactly 1 point higher than mine. I'm going to take everything you have, Piper whispered, leaning in so close. Her breath ghosted against my ear. Her voice dripped with aggression, starting with your rank and ending with your man. I didn't even bother to look up. I just uncapped my red pen and circled the single error on my own exam paper. Out in the hallway, Wells was leaning against the door frame. He was the kind of rich, devastatingly handsome asshole that parents warn their daughters about, the school's most notorious nightmare. Piper sauntered over to him, flipping her hair over one shoulder. I'm the new number one. Need a private tutor? Wells's gaze sliced through the air to find me. A predatory smirk played on his lips. Sure, he murmured. A collective gasp rippled through the corridor. My loyal guardian had just publicly defected. But they missed the way his knuckles turned bone white as he gripped the door frame. They didn't know Wells's secret. He only smiled that gently when he was preparing to drag someone down to hell. Piper thought she was the main character. Me. I was just waiting for her to self-destruct. Within her first week, Piper had become a celebrity. Why? Because she did the impossible. She beat me, the untouchable academic god, by exactly 1 point. I stared down at my papers, a near-perfect aggregate score, and took a sip of water, the cool liquid sliding down my dry throat. I meticulously logged every mistake into my notebook. Never again. Mia. My desk mate was practically drooling over her. Piper is insane. I heard Stanford basically begged her to commit early. Why would she even deign to slum it here? God knows Piper seemed to have it out for me from day one. Even during the morning announcements, when the principal broadcasted her achievements, her eyes were locked on mine, smug, cold. She walked up to my desk, bending down until we were face to face. Her expression was pure mockery. Before I came here, I heard the legend of Hadley was untouchable. Looks like the rumors were exaggerated. You can't compare a diamond to a rhinestone. Hadley a rhinestone. I looked at my near-perfect score. I begged to differ. Of course. Piper's little power trip didn't last long because she saw him. Her eyes lit up like she'd just spotted a designer bag on sale. Wells was waiting by the classroom door. He stood there tall and effortlessly imposing, looking like a model off duty. He ignored her completely. His dark eyes found me. Nerd, he said, his voice low. Let's go home. Wells and I have history, the kind that goes back to shared playpens and diapers. I was the academic weapon, perpetually ranked number one. Wells, he was the guy consistently fighting for dead last. I was obsessed with excellence. Even when we hung out, 90% of my brain power was dedicated to deriving physics formulas. So he called me nerd. But I knew better. I knew the way his tongue curled around that word, heavy and thick with a lingering, suffocating tenderness. It reminded me of the time he lost control. The memory hit me like a physical blow. While shoving me against the wall, his body caging mine, his breath hot against my neck. Miss Perfect, he had rasped, his voice rough. Do you have any idea? If you directed even a fraction of this fanaticism for school toward me, I'd lose my fucking mind. Now Piper stood there stronger, better, and from the jump, she was gunning for Wells. She stepped into his personal space with terrifying confidence, flipping her hair over her shoulder. Wells, let me tutor you. What do you say? Wells looked at her, blinking slowly, a look of faint confusion. Piper pointed a manicured finger at her own chest. I'm the one they just announced on the loudspeaker, the new number one. Trust me, I have the skills. Hearing that, Wells lifted his gaze. He locked eyes with me across the corridor. Recognition flashed in his dark irises, followed immediately by a sharp, teasing glint. He was laughing at me. Look at you, Hadley, losing your touch. My jaw tightened. I looked away, feigning indifference, but my peripheral vision betrayed me. I couldn't stop watching. Wells lowered his lashes, looking down at Piper with a voice dipped in honey. Okay. Piper beamed. She flashed a bright, toothy grin, showing off those cute little canine teeth, her eyes sparkling with victory. Beside me, Mia inhaled sharply. Wells just agreed. Wait. I thought you two were endgame. God, this Piper girl. She really takes it all. Top grades. And the hot guy behind us, Justin, chimed in, leaning back in his chair. Gotta admit, though, they look good together, like a power couple born to be together. So naive. The corner of my lip quirked up. I rested my chin in my palm, a small laugh escaping my throat. They didn't know Wells. Not really. That gentleness, that calculated softness, that was the face he wore, right before he slaughtered an obstacle in my path. He looked pure, harmless, polite. It was a fatal camouflage. His best trick, Wells wasn't a prince. He was the maddest dog in the yard. And his only command, his singular purpose in life, was to guard me. Piper, I admit, good. But if Wells is already obsessed with me, do you really think your little strategy guide stands a chance? That's right. Piper is a player. Not in the dating sense, in the literal gamified sense. Her objective, to conquer. Wells maxes out his love meter. Once that bar hits 100%, she wins. Game over. In the original script, I'm the villain, the toxic childhood friend, the evil ex. Before we even dated, the narrative dictates that once Piper arrives, I'm supposed to spiral into a jealous rage and commit unspeakable acts of sabotage. But that was the original outline. The author stopped writing the moment Piper appeared. The story stalled. And in that silence, I woke up. The trajectory of this world shifted the second I opened my eyes. Honestly, it's laughable. Before Piper showed up, I didn't even love Wells. Not really. My vision was tunneled on one thing, the Ivy League Wells. And I never happened because I wouldn't let it happen. I used to feed him that classic line, feigning innocence. High school is for building a resume. Wells, let's get into Harvard first, then we can talk about us. The book describes me as a sharp-tongued dilettante, the untouchable valedictorian. I look down on him, the rich, aimless delinquent with questionable morals, while simultaneously stringing him along, because his family's name carried weight. That's how I became his moonlight, his obsession, the one thing money couldn't buy. According to the plot, Piper's arrival triggers my insecurity. I'm supposed to scramble for his attention, only to realize he's being healed by her bubbly sunshine energy. The book got one thing right. I didn't like Wells enough to warrant that kind of madness. So why would the plot demand I become a psycho over a guy I barely tolerated? It didn't make sense, because the Wells I know wouldn't be seduced by a cheap trick like Piper. Wells is unhinged and frankly, so am I. Piper, I hope you're ready. You aren't dealing with a high school romance anymore. You're facing two psychopaths. The next day, Piper cornered me. She leaned in close, her expression dripping with fake sweetness and ambiguity. Wells told me something interesting yesterday. She whispered, a smug curve to her lips. He said, I'm like the sun said, I'm blinding. He's already starting to fall for me. So if you know what's good for you, Hadley, you'll back off. I looked at her, struggling to keep a straight face. Piper was undeniably pretty. She was loud, bright, and aggressive. She certainly resembled a sun. But there was one tiny detail she missed. Wells hated the sun. He had severe solar dermatitis growing up. If anyone gifted him anything sun-themed, paintings, keychains, plushies, he incinerated them. He literally destroyed them. Except for that one sun pendant I gave him years ago. He didn't know that was for me. I dipped my head, a short, sharp laugh escaping my throat. He wasn't flirting with her. He was treating her like a pathogen. His subtext wasn't you light up my world. Stay 93 million miles away from me, or I will break out in a rash. Piper's brow furrowed. What are you laughing at? I smoothed my expression into a mask of polite indifference. Nothing. Different worlds. Different languages. Good luck with that. Piper bristled. She could feel my dismissal, and it pricked her ego. Her voice dropped, losing the sugary coating. I'm going to step on you, Hadley. I'm going to take everything you think you own. Start accepting your fate now. She paused for effect. That includes your ranking. And that includes Wells. She looked triumphant, eyes crinkling as if she could already see me crying in a gutter. I didn't even bother lifting my eyes to meet hers again. I hugged my textbook to my chest and brushed past her shoulder. We'll see. So what if she had a cheat code? Academics was my turf. I didn't get here by luck. Got here by bleeding over textbooks at 3 a.m. while everyone else was sleeping. It would take more than a few threats to rattle me. Just you wait, Piper hissed behind me. Before the second round of midterms, the school hosted the annual fall gala. At a prep school like this, the gala was mandatory. It was a massive production, a night for the seniors to flex and the underclassmen to party. Usually, this had nothing to do with me. As Wells said, I was a nerd. I didn't dance. I had zero interest in singing. I was invisible in these settings. Wells was the opposite. Nights like this were his kingdom. He was the finale, the main event. When the atmosphere in the auditorium hit its peak, the lights cut out. A single stark spotlight sliced through the darkness, landing on him. Wells stood center stage, tall and devastating in a fitted tuxedo. He sat at the grand piano. His fingers didn't just play, they danced across the keys. Lively and graceful. He looked out at the audience with eyes like deep, dark pools resembling a young god. The thunderous applause that followed was entirely for him. I lowered my gaze. I finally stopped reviewing my AP English notes. I snapped the binder shut. I was in the front row. I had the perfect view of him. Every year from elementary school to now, this stage belonged to Wells. And every year right before he went on, he pinned me with that liquid, shimmering gaze. When I'm done, Hadley, you give me flowers first. No one else. Tonight was no different. The final notes of the piano faded into the air. I let out a soft chuckle, grabbing the potted fern I'd meticulously picked out. Not roses, not lilies. A fern, sharp, resilient just like us. I headed backstage. But before I could step into the wings, I heard her. Wells, you are incredible out there, Piper. Her voice was bubbly, high-pitched, and intense. I pulled back the heavy velvet curtain just an inch. Wells was leaning against the brick wall, swallowed by the backstage shadows. Piper was practically climbing him. She had thrown her arms around him, burying her face into his chest with zero hesitation. It was too dark to see his expression. I stepped through the curtain, walking silently toward them. As the lighting shifted, I saw what she was holding, a bouquet of sunflowers. Piper's cheeks were flushed pink. She completely ignored my arrival, batting her eyelashes at him, as she unleashed the full force of her charm. Sunflowers follow the sun, Wells, remember? Piper breathed, her voice a cloying syrup in the dimly lit backstage. I stopped a few feet away, the potted fern resting casually against my hip. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Over Piper's shoulder, Wells's eyes locked onto mine. The shadows of the backstage played across his face, but the expression in those dark, fathomless pools was unmistakable. It was a silent, desperate plea laced with homicidal intent. I could see the faint red flush already creeping up the pristine line of his jaw, his skin physically rebelling against the pollen, the bright yellow petals, the sheer audacity of her presence. I tilted my head, offering him a slow, mocking smile. Look at you, my eyes said. The king of the gala, brought low by a weed. Wells's jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard a molar crack. Slowly, deliberately, he reached up and clamped his large hands onto Piper's shoulders. With a sickeningly smooth motion, he peeled her off his chest. Sunflowers, Wells murmured, his voice a low, raspy purr that sent a visible shiver down Piper's spine. She mistook it for arousal. I knew it was the sound he made right before he broke a bone. How thoughtful. I knew you'd like them. Piper beamed, thrusting the massive bouquet closer to his face. You're so brilliant, Wells. You need something bright to match your energy. Wells didn't look at the flowers. He looked at me. His gaze dropped to the jagged, spiky green leaves of the fern in my hands. Hadley, he said, his voice instantly shifting, dropping a register into something thick and dangerously intimate. You brought me a gift. Piper whipped around, her bubbly facade faltering for a fraction of a second when she saw me standing there, untouched and unbothered. Hadley, didn't see you there. We were just having a moment. I can see that, I said, stepping forward. I extended the potted fern. For your performance. You missed a B-flat in the second movement, but I suppose the rest of it was passable. Wells let out a sharp, breathless laugh. The sound echoed off the brick walls, entirely genuine and entirely unhinged. He reached out, ignoring Piper completely, and took the terracotta pot from my hands. His long fingers deliberately brushed against mine, lingering for a second too long, his thumb tracing the blue vein on my wrist. A fern, he whispered, staring at the plant as if it were the Holy Grail. Perfect. Wells. Piper's voice was edged with confusion. What about my sunflowers? I got them specially imported. I'm highly allergic to sunflowers, Piper. Wells cut in. His tone was suddenly deadpan, wiped completely clean of the charming prince persona. He turned his head to look at her, and the temperature in the room plummeted. The predatory smirk was gone. In its place was an abyss. If I inhale another breath of that pollen, my throat will close up. Did you want to kill me? Piper blanched, stepping back, the bouquet suddenly looking like a murder weapon. I didn't know. You said I was like the sun. I thought. A metaphor, Piper, I interjected smoothly, checking my manicured nails. Though I'd say you're more like a fluorescent bulb in a gas station bathroom. Bright, aggressive, and a little nauseating. Piper's eyes flashed with real venom, the player, mask slipping to reveal the desperate conqueror beneath. Watch your mouth, Hadley. You're just bitter, because you're losing. Am I? I stepped past her, closing the distance between Wells and myself. I looked up at him. Take me home, Wells. The air in here is toxic. Wells didn't hesitate. Without breaking eye contact with me, he reached out blindly, plucked the sunflowers from Piper's trembling hands, and dropped them unceremoniously into the nearest industrial trash can. He didn't just drop them, he shoved them down into the grime with the heel of his polished Oxford shoe. Let's go, he said to me, his hand settling heavy and warm against the small of my back. We walked away, leaving Piper standing in the dark, staring at the crushed petals in the garbage. The ride back in the back of Wells's chauffeured Maybach was silent, save for the low hum of the engine. I had my AP Physics textbook open on my lap, the dim overhead reading light casting a glow on the complex equations. Suddenly, a large hand slapped flat over the page, obscuring the text. I sighed, looking up. Wells had slid across the leather seats. He was invading my space, his long legs bracketing mine. His tuxedo jacket was discarded, his bow tie undone, and hanging loosely around his neck. The rash on his jaw was angry and red. "You let her touch me," he accused, his voice a low, venomous whisper. "She ambushed you." I corrected, unmoving. "And you handled it." "I didn't want to handle it. I wanted to snap her neck." Wells leaned in closer, his dark eyes manic, searching my face for a reaction. "Why didn't you intervene sooner, Hadley? Were you testing me?" I was observing. I reached up, my cool fingertips brushing against the inflamed skin of his jawline. He let out a ragged exhale, leaning into the touch like a starved animal. "She has an objective, Wells. She operates like she has a script. She knew your schedule. She knew your piano piece. She knew you'd be backstage. She's a parasite," he muttered, closing his eyes as my thumb traced his cheekbone. "Tell me to get rid of her. Say the word, and her family's company will be bankrupt by Monday."
"No."
My voice was firm, and his eyes snapped open. "That's boring. And too easy." "Then what?" "She beat me by 1 point," I said softly, the memory still burning a cold hole in my chest. "Do you know what the statistical probability of a transfer student matching my aggregate score down to a single decimal, then exceeding it by exactly 1 point is?" Wells's eyes darkened with understanding. "She cheated." "Not in the traditional sense. She didn't steal the test paper." I tilted my head, my mind racing. "It's like she knows the answers before the questions are even written. She called herself the main character. She thinks this is a game. And what am I? The prize." Wells laughed, a dark, terrible sound. "You're the affection meter she needs to max out." I leaned closer, my lips hovering inches from his ear. "So, we're going to play her game, Wells. You're going to let her think she's winning. Let her think the Sunshine Act is melting your cold, dead heart." Wells stiffened, his hand wrapping around my wrist, pulling my hand away from his face. "You want me to let her court me? Hadley, I will vomit." "I want you to be the perfect prince," I whispered, my eyes locking with his. "Draw her in. Make her reckless. She relies on the script, Wells. So we're going to rewrite the ending. When she stands at the peak, thinking she is everything, my rank and your heart, we're going to push her off the cliff." Wells stared at me, the tension bleeding out of his shoulders, replaced by a twisted, profound adoration. He looked at me the way zealots look at their gods. "You are so wonderfully twisted," he breathed, pressing a desperate, bruising kiss to the palm of my hand. "Command me, Miss Perfect. I'll be her prince, and then I'll be her executioner." The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. To the rest of the school, the hierarchy had shifted. Piper was the golden girl, the unstoppable prodigy. And, to the collective shock of the student body, Wells, the untouchable, dangerous heir, seemed to be softening under her influence. He allowed her to sit at our table in the cafeteria. He let her carry on one-sided conversations about destiny and soulmates. When she offered to tutor him, he simply smiled, that gentle, fatal smile, and said, "Show me what you know." But I saw the cracks. I saw the way he obsessively washed his hands with scalding water after she touched his arm. I saw the dead, shark-like emptiness in his eyes when she giggled. Meanwhile, I played my part perfectly. I became the jealous ex. I started glaring at them in the hallways. I slammed my locker shut when they walked by. I let my eye bags show, pretending the stress of losing my rank was eating me alive. Every time I acted out, I could see Piper smirking, her eyes tracking empty space, as if she were reading a notification, rival affection dropping. Protagonist, victory imminent. Our battleground was the upcoming midterms, the heaviest weighted exams of the semester. One afternoon, I sat alone in the library, surrounded by towers of textbooks. I had a specific notebook open, a red, leather-bound journal. I was furiously writing down complex calculus formulas and English literature thesis predictions. I heard the deliberate click-clack of designer heels. "Piper." I didn't look up, but I subtly shifted the notebook so it was closer to the edge of the table. "Studying hard, Hadley?" Piper's voice dripped with condescension. She leaned against the mahogany table. "You look tired. It's sad, really. You used to be so untouchable. Now you're just scrambling." "Leave me alone, Piper," I said, injecting the perfect amount of tremor into my voice. "Wells and I are going to his estate this weekend to study," she continued, clearly relishing the strike. He said he likes the way I explain things. He said I make the world make sense. I gritted my teeth, gripping my pen so hard my knuckles turned white. Congratulations. Suddenly, my phone buzzed on the table. An alarm. I feigned panic, slamming the textbook shut, but leaving the red leather notebook open. I have to get to the lab, I muttered, packing my bag hastily. I rushed away, conveniently forgetting the red notebook on the table. I didn't go to the lab. I slipped behind the nearest bookshelf and waited. Through the gap in the books, I watched Piper. She checked to make sure I was gone, then snatched the red notebook. Her eyes darted across the pages, absorbing my secret study notes, my predicted essay prompts, and my flawless math formulas. She pulled out her phone and took pictures of every single page before dropping it back exactly where I left it. I smiled in the shadows. What the system didn't tell her was that I'd spent the last 48 hours deriving mathematically sound but fundamentally flawed equations. The essay prompts were based on a syllabus from 3 years ago that the teacher had explicitly scrapped. If she relied on her cheat code to copy my answers, she would fail. If her system automatically matched her score to mine +1, it would match her to my fake answers. Checkmate. The day the midterm results were posted, the entire senior class was buzzing. The massive digital board in the main hall was set to reveal the rankings at noon. Piper stood front and center, Wells by her side. She looked radiant, practically buzzing with victory. She was wearing a designer dress, her hair perfectly styled, ready for her coronation. I stood in the back, leaning against a pillar, sipping an iced Americano. Wells looked over the crowd, his gaze cutting through the mass of students to find me. He offered me a minuscule nod. "Are you nervous?" Piper asked Wells loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "I know we studied so hard together. I'm sure you did great." "I'm not nervous at all," Wells said smoothly, his hands tucked into his pockets. "I think today is going to be incredibly revealing." "Attention students," the principal's voice echoed over the PA system. "The midterm rankings are now live." The digital board flickered, and a collective gasp sucked the oxygen out of the hallway. Rank 1, Hadley Vance, aggregate score, 99.8%. Rank 2, Justin Miller, aggregate score, 96.5%. Rank 412, Wells Sterling, aggregate score, 12.0%. Piper's smile froze. Her eyes darted wildly up and down the board. "Wait," she stammered, her voice shrill. "Where am I? There must be a mistake." She kept scanning down. Past the top 100. Past the top 300. Rank 413, last place Piper Hayes, aggregate score, 0%, disqualified, academic dishonesty. Silence crashed over the hallway. The kind of absolute, suffocating silence that preempts a disaster. "What?" Piper shrieked, her hands flying to her head. "No. No, no, no. That's impossible." "I did exactly what?" She cut herself off, her eyes going wide as she stared at nothing in the air. "The system." She was reading an error message. The crowd parted as the principal walked down the stairs, flanked by the AP Physics and Literature teachers. He looked furious. "Miss Hayes," the principal barked. "My office. Now." "There's a mistake," Piper yelled, panic finally breaking her perfectly curated facade. "I didn't cheat. I am a genius. I was early admitted to Stanford." "Stanford rescinded their interest this morning," the principal said coldly. "When they were informed that you submitted a physics exam entirely composed of fake formulas deliberately designed as a honeypot trap by one of our faculty members. Formulas that were nowhere in any textbook, but were magically reproduced, stroke for stroke, on your paper." Piper's face drained of color. She whipped her head around and locked eyes with me. I took a slow sip of my Americano, raised my cup to her in a silent toast, and smiled. "You," she hissed, lunging toward me. "You set me up. You gave me fake notes." Before she could take 2 steps, a hand clamped onto her wrist, stopping her dead. It was Wells. His grip was brutal, pinning her arm in place. The gentle prince facade evaporated in a millisecond, replaced by the terrifying, cold-blooded sociopath underneath. "Let go of me, Wells," Piper cried, looking up at him for salvation. Tell them how hard we studied. You love me, right? Tell them." Wells leaned down, invading her space, his towering frame casting a dark shadow over her. He smiled, and it was the most horrifying thing I had ever seen. "Love you," Wells whispered, his voice carrying perfectly in the silent hall. "Piper, spending the last 3 weeks with you has been the most excruciating, nauseating experience of my life. I wouldn't touch you if you were the last breathing thing on this earth." Piper trembled, tears finally spilling over her lashes. But the meter, you were supposed to." "There is no meter, Piper," Wells said, his voice dropping into a register of pure, demonic cruelty. There is only reality. And in reality, you are nothing but a bug that flew a little too close to my girl. He shoved her arm away, wiping his hand on his slacks in a gesture of utter disgust. Piper collapsed to her knees, sobbing hysterically as the teachers moved in to escort her away. The crowd whispered, pulling out phones, recording the spectacular, brutal downfall of the girl who thought she could play God. The story was over. The script was burned. The crowd naturally parted as Wells walked toward me. He didn't care who was watching. He didn't care about his reputation. He stopped right in front of me, his dark eyes ablaze with a sick, devoted triumph. "Did I do well, Miss Perfect?" he asked, his voice rough. I looked at the chaos we had orchestrated. The utter destruction of a girl who thought she could conquer us with a cheat code. Then I looked up at the boy who would burn the world down just to keep my hands warm. I reached out, grabbing the lapels of his blazer, and pulled him down to my level. "You get an A+, I whispered. Wells let out a dark, ragged groan, wrapping his arms around my waist and pulling me flush against him. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling my scent like it was oxygen. Let the authors try to write another antagonist. Let the systems send another player. This world didn't belong to them anymore. It belonged to the academic god and her mad dog. And we were never letting go.